introductions. It's so great to see you all today here. So today I would like to kind of like put all our challenges and concerns a little bit aside and would like to focus on a very joyful occasion. And I'm really, really happy to be here tonight. We would like to kind of celebrate really the great achievements of Arena Tasmanova and how really science gave her the right ground to grow and nourish and become a professor at this institute and at our university. And I would like to go back a little bit in time to ourselves. So then I was actually recruited to BSIS in 2005, so quite a while ago. And back in the days, you told me that there were 3 full-time lecturers. So Jared Wiener, I guess, in Harm, Stapel, to run all the law and politics programs. So basically 3 permanent members of staff to run the programs. And over the years, you established yourself as an academic, as a valued member of the faculty here. So you designed and directed several MA programs, amongst them, for example, the MA in Political Strategy and Communication, or the MA in EU Public Policy. But you also directed, for example, the IPE program. But what I would really like to focus on today is your amazing scholarship, your research agenda centered on the progressive social transformation with projects really spanning political judgment and social justice, democratic transformation and consolidation, rule of law and accountability, and a critique of the political economy of contemporary capitalism. So this is how you made your name. This is how we all know you. This is how you're known in policy circles. And this is also, like what is so kind of like award-winning and achieving. So your publications are part of academic curricula all around the world. So they have been translated in multiple languages. You can see in the back actually books in German and also in Romanian, but your books have also been translated to Chinese, Russian, Turkish, Finnish, and many, many more. So it's really amazing to see that like your scholarship is widely read all across the globe, really. I would like to quickly put a spotlight as well on your book, your award-winning book, Capitalism on Edge. So this has received awards from 3 of the top professional bodies in political science. So the 2022 Best the International Political Economy section. You also received an honorary mention for the 2021 Susan Strange Award of the British International Studies Association and the 2021 Michael Harrington Book Award with the American Political Science Association. And I quote here, "It recognizes an outstanding book that demonstrates how scholarship can be used in the struggle for a better world." And I think this is really the theme of your work, of your academic work, of your policy work, and this is also what you will talk about today. I'm immensely proud, and the School of Politics and International Relations is immensely proud that you're promoted a professor, and I'm really looking forward to your talk today about regaining our futures. How can political theory help us break free of the tyranny of the present? So thanks very much. Congratulations.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you also. Friends, colleagues, students, as I stand before you now, I cannot help but think back on those 18 years I've spent at this wonderful place, the Brussels School of International Studies at the University of Kent. I started in 2005 and as a lecturer, so my promotion started from the very bottom. And in September last year, I was given the title of full professor. Currently, I am the only one among a body of 12 professors at the School of Politics and International Relations. So quite a remarkable thing. When I formulated the title of my talk, Regaining Our Futures, I had no idea that this would be so urgent, that we will actually be looking to regain our futures now. So I intended at the time to let you in on my latest research, and maybe I will get to that. But the talk I was invited to give today, I see now, not as only a celebration of my growth as an academic, as a scholar here, but as a forced farewell to the institution that helped me grow. All right, gesticulate a lot. Yes, the forced farewell. Sorry, I might interrupt. I get very emotional. So the institution that supported me to produce what being claimed as cutting edge, so innovative, globally acclaimed, policy relevant, and award-winning scholarship, and I have done most of it here. So that's why I was prompted today, rather than present the typical lecture of promotion, to rather look back at my work as an academic and reflect how certain circumstances enable the production of new ideas, because I believe that the way we run this place together as a community provided the perfect circumstances for the kind of scholarship that I have produced. And Nadine quoted the terms of the Michael Harrington Award. I have brought it over there, you will see that it is actually given to Albena Asmanova at the Brussels School of International Studies at the University of Kent. So it is an award for all of us here. So the life of a scholar. I remember many years ago, I was giving this office hours advice on students on their paper. Not here, not in these institutions. At the beginning of my career, many years ago, before I came here, and the student was satisfied with the advice I gave and said, "Dr. Asmanova, you are so smart. Why did you become an academic?" Clearly, he implied that nobody in their mind would become an academic, if that would be a waste of potential. At the time, I probably just laughed it away, but there is a serious answer. I think I can blame for that answer one of my very first professors. Very first day, imagine me still under communism. You know, many of you know I was born in Bulgaria, raised under the communist regime. So I was a student at Sofia University. At the very first lecture, I believe, professor of sociology, Georgi Dimitrov, said that the job of science is to sort out, to figure out how the world is put together. And that is an immense fun. So indeed, I have enormous fun being a scholar. In this haven of scholarship. This has been my intellectual kitchen, where I've cooked a delightful menu of lectures, books, some of them over there, I cannot find all of them, articles, policy analysis, public talks. So what do I exactly do? I've written, but really I'm like a student of judgment and justice. I've written on the post-communist revolutions, the Arab Spring, the erosion of the rule of law in Europe, democratic innovations, accountability, deliberations, the rise of populism. I've written on that even before the financial meltdown, when it stirred up a lot of the rise of populism, but I was writing about that already about a decade before that. And finally, the transformation of capitalism. But if there is an overarching, if there is an overarching theme of my research, this is social transformation. Why does transformation happen? How they happen or how they don't happen? And the kind. So if this is the object that interests me, also a parallel strand of my interest is the kind of theory that can be of practical political use for the purpose of emancipatory social change. In a type of analysis that can underpin what can be called a praxis of critical politics. Now, this is the term that my PhD student and collaborator, Raphael Wolf, coined once to describe my work, and I'm borrowing it. It's a very good way to describe exactly what I've been trying to do. A praxis of critical politics. Thank you, Raphael. So what have I exactly done? What I've been paid to do exactly for the past 18 years at the BSAS? I've run the numbers. On top of the things that Nadine mentioned, the MA programs taught 11 lecture courses on subjects as varied as political philosophy, democratic theory, state and nation for building political communication, and global political economy. I think it's very rare that somebody can deliver an MA level education on such a vast, between political communication and political economy. It's a sea of knowledge that I had to maintain at the appropriate level of graduate education. What else? Supervised 11 doctoral projects of brilliant young scholars. I used to argue that academics should produce only one book in their lifetime and make it a good one, because there's just too much published. We tend to think that we tend to write more than we read. One of the curses of our time. But I published 2. In my defense, these are books on vastly different subjects when I felt I had something to say. The one that is Scandal of Reason is on political epistemology, democratic deliberations, and Capitalism on Edge is analysis of contemporary capitalism. I've edited 3 books. Produced 44 academic articles, 115 invited public lectures and keynote addresses, 47 pieces in the mass media, 9 policy reports spanning the rule of law and the economics of sustainable development. I've created the Journal of Emancipations with my florist James Chamberlain at Mississippi State University, which we have been editing now for 3 years together with a stellar editorial board we established. As Nadine mentioned, my work has been translated into 10 languages, including Chinese and Finnish, to my surprise. No, but probably The most surprising, I'm often asked, students usually dare ask these things, what is the most surprising thing in my academic career? And that has been that one of my articles, something I published in 2014, ended up in a collection of edited classical texts of social thought, a German collection edited by Axel Honneth and Lisa Herzog, alongside with the works of Hegel, Marx, Rosa Luxemburg, Adam Smith, Martin Durkheim, Adam Smith, Ricardo, so and a few others. That was surprising. I did not complain. Yes, let's keep that. Now, why theory? Why did I choose theory as my field? Now, before I clarify that, I think at this point, after I poured on you a glimpse of how tiring it has been to be Albena's monologue with all this production, I have to clarify something. The BSAS has not been just the institutional scaffolding of the edifice of my research. The community here, that living being we are together. My so dear, so smart, amazing colleagues, my peers, they're my pals. Also my PhD students, they're my equals. Our so boldly intelligent students, their intelligence is really sparkling. So they have been the inspiration and given me a lot of the energy to be a scholar, a policy advisor, a writer, a public intellectual, and most importantly, most delightfully, a teacher and a tutor. All my colleagues have similar stories. Nothing lasts forever. Institutions get demolished, contracts terminated, but two things survive. What do you think they are? I would think that the two things that survive and that merit to survive are friendships and ideas. So let me tell you, my friends, about some of the ideas I've had as a scholar. So first, it's important I committed myself to political theory as my vocation very early when I started studying political science at Sophia University. Why theory? Somebody probably had mentioned to me this quote from Einstein that's very, very popular and very seductive for theorists, that it is theory which decides what can be observed. I thought to myself, man, this is so powerful, and this is so powerful. But then I've been writing also about exactly my attention to political epistemology in the sense of not only what can be observed, but how can be observed. So it's been a fascinating journey. I wrote my first book on that. The grand ambition of social theory, in the way I've been practicing critical social theory, is to guide emancipatory action. But this sounds very grand, but I think that any success story of an emancipatory action starts from a very humble, very down-to-earth attempt to provide a sound diagnosis of the conundrums society faces. So I've been writing most recently, trying to sort out the current conundrum. What is this, our current conundrum? On the back of the 2008 financial crisis and the infamous COVID pandemic, Western societies tell themselves that they are at the point of a tectonic shift. Some call it a paradigm shift in policy, in the direction we take. Tipping point. It's very interesting to live at this tipping point. So it's a very special historical juncture now inhabit, on which two competing stories, like they compete, two stories, contrasting stories, compete to take the upper hand. The first story goes something like that. Western societies, so the first story goes like that. Western societies are at the height of their material affluence, scientific brilliance, and institutional sophistication. That's true. We face grave challenges, ecological emergency, inequality, poverty, but we have the knowledge, the resources, and the capacity to contain climate change and largely eradicate poverty and disease. We know exactly what needs to be done and how to do it. Bold and elaborate policy plans exist, such as the European Green Deal, which is indeed impressively comprehensive and deeply transformative. It is mind-blowing how powerful that policy plan and the machinery behind it is. It's very impressive. I have participated in drawing some of these policy designs. I particularly recommend this one, The Great Shift from a Broken World to Sustainable Well-Being, which together with my colleagues at the Independent Commission for Sustainable Equality we issued last year, we advanced no less than 242 policy recommendations on how to fix Europe. So we have the vision, we have the capacity. We don't need any new ideas. It's very clear what needs to be done. Soon artificial intelligence is going to relieve us from the mundane tasks that are draining our creative energies. Our scientists, I read recently, have invented cosmic concrete to build houses on Mars. What is that we cannot achieve? So the future looks bright, and together we can counter the adversities of the present. The competing story is one about what I like to call political tunnel vision and myopia. Admirable. Long-term and global policy commitments are neglected in favor of short-term and local concerns. So short-term, exactly this, myopia and local tunnel vision. Climate disaster is upon us, but energy security is trumping climate concerns. We have parties that mobilize using the channels of democratic mobilization to pull back from those commitments. They're popping up everywhere increasingly around Europe, the Netherlands, the Spain, Italy most recently. So we're trapped, according to that story, we're trapped in the tyranny of a present scarred by rising poverty, inequality, insecurity, what else? Discrimination and autocratic rule. Violations of the rule of law are rampant even in the mature democracies of Europe. I have studied that in this report I created with the help of another PhD student of mine, Jaime Razun, for the European Parliament not long ago, where we study the erosion of the rule of law in France, Spain, and Bulgaria, and actually the way the European Commission, inadvertently, of course, is becoming complicit with those violations. The report is over there on the table. So the controversy is that both stories are true. We stand at a point in history when there is an overwhelming understanding, people are very well educated, they don't strictly understand. We're not only in the grip of the big economic interest of corporations. It is, the demos, the democratic publics that support these nefarious tendencies. So there is an overwhelming understanding of the need for change and the desire to change, yet the needed change does not quite take place. Things get done, but very much like the revolutions I experienced back in my native Bulgaria, the change is not exactly what we had in mind. The typical diagnosis is one, I said that political theory needs to give a diagnosis. So why is this? Capacity for change, desire for change, readiness, ability, and then not quite. The typical diagnosis of theory that it is in crisis. There has been much talk about crisis. You're familiar with that crisis of democracy, of capitalism, of the global liberal order. The narrative of crisis has been with us for now what? 25 years. A whole generation is brought up in the condition of a crisis. Polycrisis is the fashionable word. Accumulation of multiple crises. But I've argued this is not plausible. I have argued in some of my writing. This is not a crisis, a misdiagnosis. What's crisis? Crisis is a radical but short-lived challenge, threat to an entity's existence with three possible outcomes: death, recovery, or radical transformation. Instead, we are stuck in a situation in which the crisis itself is in a perpetual loop. So the crisis is entrapped in a crisis of its own. So there's a crisis of the crisis, is what I have described, called first the crisis of crisis. In other writings, I've called it a meta-crisis, like crisis of the crisis. Like a person suffering from a chronic illness, our societies have been in a state of perpetual low inflammation, sick, a feverish, restless stasis. The whole generation knows only that context. This is the new normal for them. Now, because policymaking has been dominated by the discourse of crisis, and not, of course, not all policymaking, but mostly, democratic policymaking, because it is responding to these public concerns, public anxieties, has been dominated by discourse of crisis. The policy process has taken up the force, naturally, the form of crisis management. But crisis management automatically retracts the horizon of thinking. And the concerns of today must trump those of tomorrow. It pulls it towards the present. We're forever trapped in the tyranny of the present. Our policies become reactive crisis management undertakings that, while providing very necessary emergency fixes to an ailing system, they unwittingly perpetuate the crisis because the roots of that crisis are not addressed, but rather institutionalized into a new normal. So I have written about that process of institutionalization. But what I want to, because remember I said that the job of theory is above all, first of all, to give us a lucid diagnosis. And I think that part of our problem is that the diagnosis of crisis is dangerous. This is not a crisis. We're in Belgium, we can say this is not. It is a dangerous diagnosis because it fixes our attention. It justifies that our attention is focused on the short term. We need a better diagnosis. And my question is, can political theory provide it? As I said, physics, hey, we can, or biology, we can build houses on Mars. Economics, they're not giving us the answers, probably because political theory is not giving the right diagnosis. So what can we do? What kind of theory, what kind of, or rather, what kind of theorizing, what style of thinking, I believe, can deliver a better diagnosis. And this is a thinking, the kind of theory that is trapped neither in political expediency, because Christ's thinking is about expediency, nor in wishful thinking. So stay away from utopia, but don't, respond only to political expediency. And I realized that this is the kind of, the different ends, different elements of this kind of theory that I have tried to elaborate for the past many years. So all my life, as I said, I've been a student of transformations, of social change, but also of stuckedness, of the inability to get there. I've become a specialist on that inadvertently. The topic found me because of the special time and place I was born. I was born in Bulgaria and grew up under the dictatorship that called itself socialist. Social change became a part of my biography when in the spring of 1988, as a first-year student. These are pictures from high school. Yeah, we were trained in fight capitalism in the basement. We have weekly military trainings in the basement. I have some sort of a medal for excellent shooter with AK. All I remember is I just closed my eyes. Yeah, so this topic of failed transformations found me when I inadvertently I joined an environmental organization, a club, an ecological club, and it turned out that it didn't have the blessing of the party. So here I was, a dissident, without really meaning it. So my involvement with the dissident movement was formative for me. And I'm making that point because I think to be a good theorist, one needs to stay very close to reality. That's an advice I often give my students: go make your hands dirty with reality. Really stay as close as possible. You cannot just read theory books at home. So the post-communist transformations became my training ground also as a scholar, as I was personally involved in the struggle for radical change. And the first wisdom many of my generation learned was this: get rid of utopia. The socialist utopia had become the dogma, and with that, a tool of political and intellectual oppression. The challenge for us then was to think of progressive politics without replacing the communist utopia with another one. So the question of emancipation without utopia requires thinking without dogma. Now, I had two sources of inspiration or guidance of this kind of non-dogmatic thinking. The Czech dissident, one-time president, philosopher, thinker, Václav Havel, and the founders of the Frankfurt School, especially Marcuse and Adorno, that I discovered there as a student under the dictatorship. Now, they drew on, the Frankfurt School drew on Marx without the Marxist orthodoxy, and they were critical of Western democracies as, Havel was also critical of the East European communist regime, quasi-communist regimes. I was indeed very influenced by Václav Havel. One particular insight he had for us that communism and capitalism are not opposites. This is a false dichotomy. According to him, these were two systems that incarnated the same exploitative, alienated logic that he has a word for it, samopohib, self-waste. Under both social systems, there's something terrible going on there for humanity and for human beings and for nature. That's why we joined the ecological movement. Now, Havel also formulated for me a certain mindset for conducting critique and for engaging in social transformation. What he describes is a politics of hope versus optimism. As he puts it, it is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. This resonated very much with the way we were driven in the anti-communist rebellion at the time. Really, we could not know how it's going to pan out, but it did make sense for us to have that struggle. Another insight that came then in the same direction from the Frankfurt School, it very much resonated with the way we were mobilized back then, was this position of Theodor Adorno as one of the founders of the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, that we do not need to know what's right in order to fight when something's wrong. So that feeling that something is amiss is enough of a motivation to conduct this struggle without utopia. Now, this kind of mindset, I was very young at the time, of course, I didn't have an elaborate theory, but this kind of mindset, this intuitive approach to reality, helped me helped me actually sound the alarm that the new democracies that were forming after '89 were what I called dictatorships of freedom, that they were not what all scholars and all thinkers were celebrating, but there was something that is very, in fact, creepy and not in line with our imaginings about liberal democracy. So I wrote that paper, Dictatorships of Freedom, in 1990, while actually being engaged with the revolution, and it was later published in Praxis International in '92, becoming one of the very first writings to this negative diagnosis of the changes undergoing in Eastern Europe. So the experience with the warped transformations in Eastern Europe was formative for my thinking. It showed me how practical political involvement could be done without, being in the faith of another dogma. Maybe I'm taking too much. I'm thinking maybe I'm making too much of it. I was not so insightful. Actually, let me confess what really happened. The person, our dean back then at the philosophy department, who threatened to expel me because I had joined this environmental movement. As soon as the regime fell, he tore up his party ticket and became the leader of the Democratic Party in the university. So the evidence was too much in my face that these were dictatorships of freedom. So this kind of insights, I appeal to young scholars, take them, be frank, don't be fooled by the wishful thinking of the older generation of scholars around you, who at the time wished that these democracies were genuine and they were taking them as such, describing them in those terms. In fact, I remember at the time, so this piece of writing actually landed me a few offers for a PhD in New York, in the US. And I took the offer from the new school, first because I wanted to live in New York. Second, because the scholar who helped me publish this, Andrea Ratto, told me, Albena, I believe you're not right in your negative diagnosis of what's going on in Eastern Europe, but it's a beautiful argument, so I'll help you publish that. So this kind of support to students, even when we do not believe in their arguments, was really an example of how to be an academic for me. So I owe Andrea Ratto a lot for that. So let's move to New York. New York in the 1990s was another reality that shaped my existence, my thinking as along this path of discovery of the kind of critical theory I wanted to do. You can imagine moving to New York from Bulgaria, from one context of a very radical social change, and you're changing socialism with capitalism. And then what happens in New York in the 90s, what I find at the New School, which had this reputation for the heritage of the Frankfurt School of Critical Social Theory, I found very different discussion of injustice there. It was all about gender equality, which seemed to me, as compared to the collapse of communism, that seems very frivolous. No critique of capitalism, not in the 90s, not even by the Frankfurt School. It was all about democracy and talking. So how deliberative democracy could deliver society and a good life. So, of course, I understood that this is simply different context. So one of my immediate interests, and that became the object of my PhD dissertation, is this issue, think about relevance, how an issue of injustice or any social phenomenon becomes politically relevant as an object of struggles and then an object of policy, hopefully. So that was in the center then of my work in New York. And then I was very bothered with the replacement of the critique of capitalism with trust in communication and democracy. So I thought there was something to be done about that. So I became convinced that a renewal of what I considered at the time, forgive me, I was in my 20s and very, very ambitious. So I thought that we needed to recast critical social theory by doing at least 3 things. Give it a realist political epistemology, that is, one that can detect the way contestation for justice takes place without moralization. That can give us the sense of how come people, when they even disagree about injustice, when they're enemies in that conflict, in fact, they might be talking about the same thing. So this kind of what I call political epistemology of disagreements about injustice and the dynamics of justification. So we needed a proper theory of politicization, and we needed to bring back the critique of the political economy into critical social theory in order to be able to get at this very structural sources of these injustices that we're sorting out. So I set out basically to accomplish this in the rest of my life. The first two objectives were the object okay, I added this slide, yes, of my dissertation. And that dissertation is focused on what I call the paradox of judgment. That was one of the first new terms that I invented, and I've invented a lot, too many in my life. But the paradox of judgment goes like that. The more ideal theory a model of judgment or our thinking contains, guided by these utopias, grander moral ideals, the less applicable it is to political practice. But the opposite is no good either, because the less ideal theory, the less morally rigorous, therefore less reliable it is. Why should we, take something if it does not have a normative claim for what is good and what is right? So both approaches are useless for emancipatory critique and action. And I set out in my dissertation to sort this out and clarify the path in between. So that became my first book, The Scandal of Reason. You will note that it took me 12 years to publish it. And let me, as I've started confessing, I'll confess why it took me 12 years. Well, I thought at the time that it was ridiculously ambitious. I crafted there a political epistemology of critical political judgment. Oh God. I spoke there about the common phronetic, that is certain kind of phronesis is practical wisdom, underpinnings of conflicting claims to justice. I spoke about dialectics of seeing, that later that became, the first conceptual framework for later what I developed as a theory of politicization. There I, directed the public deliberations that were, the epitome of progressive thinking at the time. I said they need public deliberations to be emancipatory, that is to help fight domination. They need to disclose the common structural roots of injustice. So we need to get somehow to the political economy or other mechanisms that generate these claims. So at the time it looked ridiculously ambitious. Does anybody know why eventually I published it? It has to do with Kant. Richard Sakwa was very, very grateful for him. I applied for promotion within the 2 years of my appointment here. He said, no promotion without a book. So sometimes it really helps to be kicked and pushed. So I brushed up my manuscript and came up with Columbia University Press with, and both my books are actually with this wonderful series, New Directions in Critical Theory, edited by my dear colleague Amy Allen. So this was one of those, great ideas that I had by screening very closely and by being honest about, the way I was shocked by the political debates I found at the time. The next big idea I had in Europe. So we're moving. I packed my bags at some point. I came to Europe in '97. But as so I was with this research, I was at Vesalius College at the time, a young professor, and then some groupings, left parties in the European Parliament, asked me to research for them a puzzle they were in development. They were confronting is that in the early, so it was in 2003, in the run-up to the European elections, they noticed that in most member states, the left that was in power was losing elections, although the left had done very well economically, low unemployment, good economic growth, and yet they were losing elections, they were losing voters to this anti-establishment formation that later we started calling populism. So I was very lucky that a real problem was presented to me and I was invited to sort it out. This is how my work on populism started, with this question the left posed to me, how come? And I discovered that what is driving this shift of support, electoral support from the left to the far right is insecurity rather than other grievances, but this anxiety of insecurity. And that, sorry, and that what the mistake of the left was not either to ignore that, to dismiss it as populism, or to misread those grievances as inequality. So this is how I came to formulate the right to politics as what I call a meta right. That is the right to have, this is part of my way of conceptualizing politicization, how social grievance becomes a relevant policy issue. So it starts with this right, the right to have a grievance of injustice be considered a relevant social concern and a valid object of policy making. So in terms of, so my probably I've spent a decade writing about populism, but as part of the thorough change of the ideological landscape of liberal democracies, claiming that even using that label, populism, obscures deep and durable changes, and those changes I describe as a shift from the familiar left-right opposition, the dynamic of left-right capital, capital labor opposition, into an opportunity risk poles of alignment that in fact cut across, don't align with the left and right, but cut across the left and the right. So those who see the new economy of global market integration and digitalization as an opportunity, they align behind the pole of opportunity, and those who see this as risk, they, both from the left and the right, they mobilize around the risk pole. This is, I claim this is all driven by a new agenda of concerns with four components: economic, political, physical, and cultural insecurity. So we have the economic, the political, the cultural components of a very important new agenda of public concerns, to which I was pleading parties need to respond properly, with what I call building a political economy of trust rather than the shortcuts of anti-immigration and securitization. The first publication happened in 2004, so that is actually one of the two articles I have published before coming here. So the first was Dictatorship of Freedom, the second is this one, so the rest is really happened, all the rest happened here. And if you would ever pick up any of the tens of articles I've produced on populism, pick this one that I've authored with Azar Dakwar, The Inverted Post-National Constellation, Identitarian Populism in Context. We wrote that together. It was good fun. We did it very fast. So that, cutting edge, I could say. It was, I was ahead I was writing about that before everybody started noticing the rise of populism, especially with the economic meltdown of 2008. But it seemed that I needed, in order to conduct a proper investigation of the structural roots of it, as I was pleading in my first book, I needed to conduct a comprehensive critique of contemporary capitalism. And then I have, the whole conceptual paraphernalia there about the repertoire of capitalism with its what I call constitutive dynamics, and actually I owe it to Azar, the second one. He pointed that it was missing from my work. So I speak about the constitutive dynamic or operative logic of capitalism, which is the conventional production of profit. But then the enabling dynamic of primitive appropriation was missing from my first drafts. So I do all that to him. And then the internal structure, rather than talking about structure as some sort of a actor lurking in a dark corner, to de-reify structure, I speak of institutions, specific institutions with structuring effect. Then we have various distributive outcomes and an ethos or set of beliefs that orient our behavior. So I use this matrix of analysis in applying it to the analysis of contemporary capitalism. So I propose that each of these constitutive elements gives us, directs our thinking towards specific type of domination. So the systemic dynamic creates what I call systemic domination. It comes with especially two types of harm or injustices: ubiquitous precarity and environmental trauma. The structural the institutions with structuring effects, so the structural dimension creates structural domination where the exploitation is the typical harm. And then we have relational domination in terms of inequalities, inequality and exclusion, which are a matter of the unequal distribution of resources. Not all inequality leads to domination, but some of it does. So I have proposed that emancipatory critique and criticism should target all these three different forms of domination. But in order to call itself properly radical, critique needs to keep its eye on relational domination. Now, why? Because we tend to be trapped in what I call the paradox of emancipation. If we are not aware of these three types of dominations we are fighting, we might get entrapped in the paradox of emancipation, and it goes something like that. Success in fighting one form of domination comes at the price of aggravating another. For instance, the struggles against inequality and exclusion, what I call relational domination, that is, we have in relation to one another, tends to enhance the value of the social system within which equality and inclusion are being sought. Thus, in fact, deepening, increasing the legitimacy of an otherwise unjust system. So basically exactly the opposite of Woody Allen's dictum. I don't want to be a member of any club that would have me. In fact, in social life happens exactly the opposite. The more we want to be a member of any club, the more we value it. So let us, my appeal is, let us not, in our thinking, get entrapped in the paradox of emancipation, but keep our eye on the system and not be so eager to be equally included or included as equals in a system that otherwise sucks. Okay. So what has attracted most attention, unfortunately, my theoretical model in the infamous chapter 2 is not so much read, but the conclusions have been taken on board, and that is that ubiquitous precarity is really what I call the pandemic of precarity that affects almost everybody, is the real grievance of the 99%. And I've been glad that this message has been taken on board by policymakers. I've been invited to give a lot of talks, including at the OECD, at the trade unions, at the European Commission and Parliament. So there is some important take-in from that research. I'm very glad to report. So I have come up with this term of precarity capitalism that is marked by this ubiquitous precarity. So I would not preach here, lecture too much on what is or what is not precarity, but I have now, there is a lot of talk about precarity and very little actual definition of it, but I have come to understand it as condition of, very importantly, politically generated. So it's important not to just say, oh, it's the risks of modernity, the dangers of modernity, the uncertainty, world in flux. No, there are specific policies generating precarity, and it's what they generate is a economic and social vulnerability that is rooted in the insecurity of livelihoods. It is a form of disempowerment that comes from a curious misalignment between the responsibilities that are kept being pushed on us and our incapacity to carry those responsibilities. So misalignment between responsibility and power that is lifted, capacity to cope. And whenever I give those talks about precarity, you know, people really come to tell me, I mean, even managers of companies, those who we all envy or hate because they are so well employed and rich, they come that they are really under enormous pressures and they live this incapacity to cope. So why is important to admit that inequality, poverty, and precarity are the three scourges of our times? Is because precarity has a very important impact on political agency. It harms the individual material and psychological welfare, but it also hampers society's capacity to manage adversity and govern itself, as we have seen during the COVID pandemic. Our affluent, scientifically advanced societies had an incapacity to cope with this pandemic because they were afflicted by this precarity. Importantly, the political impact is very grave, basically because the anxiety that precarity creates is either fuels this kind of reactionary attitudes that we see mobilized in populism, although I don't like the term, but anti-establishment protests. But also, ultimately, it is politically debilitating. We don't have the mental space, the mental capacity, the energy, the time to engage in politics. So this, I believe that what I presented to you as one of the conundrums of our time is very much due to this massive precarization of society. But this also creates an unprecedented momentum for change because, in my reading, even the winners in the distribution of advantage are discontent, and political forces should be able to build on that discontent with overarching discontent with precarity. Now, I am working on the solutions. I will not tell the solutions, they're top secret. But with my dear colleague, Calypso Nicolaides, who used to be at Oxford, now she's at the European University Institute. We're writing this work, we call it Democracy with Foresight. This is Calypso's term. We're combining, you know, my work on progressive social transformation, like mainly my notion of have called socially responsible rule in the political economy of trust, with her work on sustainable European integration, especially her work on democratic innovations. She has this wonderful idea about the democratic panopticon, how democracies can actually make elites feel observed, and in this way put pressure on them to do the right thing. So we're combining our research to answer the puzzle of why our societies have these capacities and then are so unable to deliver on that capacity. So democracy with foresight, in fact, you could have a little taste of that. We contributed, Calypso and I, the guest editorial to a study which the European Trade Union Confederation with the European Trade Union Institute publishes every year. So we've written that chapter there, just flagging out of our thinking on how to construct democracy with foresight. Now, this is it, but let me just say, I said I want to offer some thoughts about what are the circumstances that generate great ideas. And in my work on precarity, I've said that precarity, we need to fight precarity, we need some sort of stability in order to walk tall and think big. And this is what I found here at the Brussels School of International Studies at the University of Kent, because it seemed that we are very solid, that we were such a great idea, a British degree in the capital of Europe, that if it did not exist, somebody would have created us. So that certainty, I believe, gave me the capacity to create this innovative scholarship. And well, back to my idea of regaining our futures. It is difficult, it is challenging, but we shall regain our futures. Let's do it together. We individually will manage, but it will be so much more wonderful if we do it together. Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, there's a moment to take them now. We can all do the ones that are online as well. So, everyone's stunned.
Yes, they should be.
I'll take advantage of being next to the mic, sorry. Thanks and congratulations again. I'm just plant of the 3 levels of domination.
Present yourself,
right here.
introduce yourself.
Yeah. So for those who don't know me, my name is Ceci. I was a student here 50 years ago. I'm exaggerating a little. I think it was about 2009. And Albana was was the head of the program I was doing, which is the IPE program. And I'm so glad looking back many years ago that I did take that course, and it's taken me to many places. So happy to have been part of this talk that had an expose of beautifully done by Albana. But I'm coming back to the 3 types of domination and you know, thinking forward about the work you're doing in terms of finding solutions, right? Have you interrogated how the 3 levels interact with each other? Just to give an example, would it be thinkable that actually, when we look at inequality, how does that transform to systemic domination? Yeah, and I'm just thinking in the context of events we've seen in the recent past, both political, but also from an acting point of view, and how rapid they come from one single incident to global movement or to global event of global nature. So perhaps you can share your thoughts
Ceci, great question. I was just wondering what to write my next paper about, and this is what's going to be. I have not done it. No.
I'll send you the bill.
Anybody else? No? I could just, this is more of a this is more of a statement in the Q&A online stream. It's one of your PhD students, Reda, is just wanting to thank you for your unflagging help and support. And he just wanted to say that as a PhD student, he greatly benefited from your knowledge and expertise, and that you're a great inspiration to all of us here at BSAS, especially the early academic researchers. Yeah, so just wanted to
my joy.
Yeah.
Not just pleasure, my joy.
Go.
I'll do something quick. Maybe. Oh no, it's okay. I have a loud voice.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh my gosh, Reda inspired me, but I'm one of the few people in the program that you convene, the political strategy and communication. And it's been an extraordinary year. Taught us so very much. The book that you just presented to us, I'm going to use for my dissertation because you guided me in that way, and it makes complete and perfect sense and put into words something that I've been searching for to help me understand the way a certain problem in the world works. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for saying.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't think anybody should speak after hope. That's what we need. And the bubble is losing its bubbles. Yes.
But still something about friendship, right? I just sent a message to Professor Groom, sorry for my voice, I have a cold a bit, who was the creator, I think, of
Yes.
this.
John Groom.
John Groom, I'm Georgios Kostak. He was also Professor Groom's student at Kent, and I succeeded him briefly here in his lectures for 2 years. And I'm very glad and honored to have Alpena on our board, the advisory board at the Foundation for Global Governance Sustainability. And I always felt what you said about this team, a community, a small university, relatively unknown, at least when I joined it. Now it's more known and here in Brussels, creating the right conditions for great ideas, great people who really change the world. And your story, I think, is really an example of a major example of that, and gives hope to everybody, back to hope. And we should continue, even in not utopian idealistic hope. And a question for you, you are an agnostic, not of religion, but of even the politics or science. What is your ideal, which may not be utopia, but if you succeed in what you're trying to do, what would be better for you and the world?
Oh my God. Before coming and going, I think we should have a whole institute, answering this. But without, we need to be idealists without utopia. In fact, I coined this term once when I was describing Franz Timmermans' work. He's being an idealist without utopia. Go against the stream, against the odds. This is it. We just need to have that courage to go against the odds at the time. Okay. There's one more.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel. I didn't have the chance to take your classes, but they have been very, very inspirational. Just to go a little bit back, so you mentioned about the 1990s. You were born in a former communist country. I'm from Romania, so I'm very familiar with what happened. So you were in 1990s, you were in New York, and you're looking back in 1990s, what was happening simultaneously in Bulgaria. We are 30 plus years after. You mentioned a transformation. So how that looks like in your past years right now?
Short answer is that there are some elements that happened in our countries. There, for instance, the economy was not privatized, it was personalized. So there are certain dynamics that are still there that mark these societies as highly precarious. They're politically precarious. So the sources of precarity there are political rather than economic. So I think this society is in deep trouble because of that. That's my short answer, of course. Over drinks, if you buy me drinks, I can tell you. Let's celebrate.